government's been going crazy, spitting out money like a Pez dispenser that's broken. Just no more short-term rentals. No soup for you. Hey, so unless you've been living under a rock, you already know that short-term rentals are red hot. This craze is sweeping the nation, and everyone, including me, is getting in on it. Well, in this video, we're going to discuss if short-term rentals are really the way to build long-term sustainable wealth and hit financial freedom, or if they're more of a flash in the pan. I know I'm the guy that wrote the Burr book. I know I wrote Long Distance Real Estate Investing. I'm also a real estate agent, but I own a lot of real estate myself, both short-term and long-term rentals. I don't think that there's anyone in the country more qualified than me to give you some perspective on how short-term rentals should fit into your portfolio, or if they should at all. In this video, you're going to learn what role short-term rentals should play in your portfolio and how to create a balanced one so that you win in the end. And if you stick around all the way to the end, I will tell you what type of properties I'm buying right now so you can do the same. All right, so let's get into the brass tacks. How do we know if something is a short-term rental or a long-term rental? Well, here's an easy way that you can tell. It all depends on your tenant base. If you're going to be renting this out to a tenant that is on a monthly lease, as in they pay you the same amount of money every single month to use your space, and it's usually for around a 12-month period, that's what we're now calling a long-term rental. On the other end, if you are renting your property out for an unspecified number of days that the tenant gets to pick, maybe you call your tenant guests. They often find it on platforms like Airbnb or VRBO, a vacation rental type atmosphere where someone is saying, I want to use this property for a certain period of time, and I'm willing to pay this much per night. Those are what we call short-term rentals because the guest is staying for a shorter period of time. Now let's talk about what some of the big differences between the two might be. In a long-term rental, it is much more hands-off. You are responsible for maintaining the basics of the property. You got to make sure the lights stay on and the water is still going to the property and nothing major breaks. In a short-term rental, you are responsible for everything. You have to keep it furnished. You have to worry about the laundry being done, having enough towels, toothpaste, soap. You often have to keep water in the place for the person. As somebody leaves, you need to send a cleaner in to clean the place up to get it for the next person with a huge checklist. You basically are becoming the owner of a hospitality property. You're kind of like a little mini hotel. It is much more hands-on, much more labor intensive, and it has a much higher risk profile, but with that often comes higher return. Let's talk some short-term rental, long-term rental, pros and cons. Short-term rental pro number one. You're probably going to maximize the possible revenue you can ever get out of a property, which will also maximize your cash flow in most cases. So to sum that up, short terms are typically the most profitable asset class you can get into. Pro number two, short-term rentals allow you to get into neighborhoods, locations, and property types that you never could have touched before. By maximizing economies of scale, large groups of people, 10, 20, 30 big, can get into huge properties that you never could have owned, and they can actually spend less than a hotel by renting your Airbnb. Pro number three, it teaches you how to be a business person, not just a real estate investor. Short-term rental cons. One, it's a ton more work. This is not passive income, so do not be deceived and think that you're going to get into this and just buy a property and someone else is going to manage it. Short-term rental con number two, it is much riskier. If somebody doesn't book your property, you have no revenue coming in, you typically have a much higher mortgage on something like that. And short-term rental con number three, it is less secure. You don't know if the municipality where you bought this is going to allow short-term rentals in the future, so you are taking more risk and being less secure when you buy a short-term rental. Now let's talk long-term rental pros. They are much less work. That's one of the main reasons you buy it. You put it in there, you hire a property manager who, by the way, I didn't even mention this. Property managers of long-term rentals typically charge around 8 to 10%. Short-term rentals, they often charge 20 to 30%. Long-term rental pro number two. It is a better long-term path to sustainable wealth. You can have more of these types of properties because they require less work. And long-term rental pro number three. You don't have to worry nearly as much about zoning laws as you do with short-term rentals. They are much more secure. It is very unlikely that there's ever going to be a city that comes out and says, we're not going to allow people to rent out their property, because if you invest in a growing city, there is more demand for rental properties than there are for anything else. Now, long-term rental cons, let's talk about this. Number one, You can't really do anything to increase how much revenue you bring in. Rents are what they are. They move with the market. So with a short-term rental, you can do something to make your house nicer, advertise it better, be able to charge more per stay by adding some little amenities. You can't do that with a long-term rental. What you got is what you got. Long-term rental con number 2. Your tenants will be living in this property, not staying there for a short period of time, which means they will beat the place up, usually much more than a short-term rental person will. It's harder to get into the house to see what kind of condition it's in. If something goes wrong, like there's a leak that's hitting your floor from the shower, on a long-term rental, you might not find out about it till 2 years go by and you have some massive rot going on in the bathroom. In a short-term rental, your cleaner is going to notice that as soon as they get in there to clean the place up and bring it to your attention. And long-term rental con number 3. When the market changes quickly, when rents go up quickly, you can't keep up with that because you're usually signing a long-term lease. Most of these long-term rentals have a 12-month lease at minimum. Sometimes it's more. So if rents have gone up since your last lease agreement, there's nothing you can do. You are contractually obligated to keep rents where they are. And a bonus tip, another con for long-term rentals is that although the work is less on a long-term rental, it could be harder to scale because they make less money. So the long-term rental game is typically more useful for people that are already making good money in their career. So if that's where you're at, long-term rentals would be good for you. But if it's not, that's a pretty big con. So let's talk about if long-terms or short-term rentals are better for you. At a high level view, here's how I look at it. Long-term rentals are less work, less risk, but less return. Now, part of what has made short-term rentals so popular is it's getting harder and harder to cash flow traditionally because prices keep going up. That's really created a huge market for short-term rentals. But you have to understand that the further you get into short-term rentals, the more you're going towards more risk with that return. You also have to understand that certain municipalities do not allow short-term rentals. That makes them inherently more risky. So imagine that you spend $1 million to buy a beautiful property and you're crushing it as a short-term rental. Everybody wants it. And then 2 years later, the city where you bought it says, we're getting too much pressure from residents that don't like these. They're driving the price of all the other homes so high that nobody else can buy one. And we put it to a vote and the residents have decided we do not want to allow short-term rentals to be in our city. If you own a property that you've been using as a short-term rental and the only way to make it cash flow is as a short-term rental, you're left very exposed and you could actually possibly lose your property. And if you're thinking, well, I'll just sell it, you probably won't be able to sell it for as much because the person buying it isn't going to be able to use it as a short-term rental. In that scenario, the value of the properties could absolutely come down and you could be left underwater. This is why I'm saying short-term rentals are inherently riskier. That does not mean they are bad. That does not mean they are good. It means you have to understand the personality of the asset that you are buying. Single-family homes tend to appreciate the most, but have the worst cash flow. Multifamily homes tend to have the most cash flow, but less appreciation. And then short-term rentals tend to have the absolute most cash flow, but they also come with more risk. So from that perspective, long-term rentals will always be the safer bet. Now, when it comes to financing these properties, you basically have two different kind of loans that will work in the residential space. One is a conventional loan that's going to look at your personal ability to repay that loan. It's based off your DTI, your debt to income ratio. The other is what we call a debt service loan. That means that you are getting a loan based on the property's ability to repay the loan you got, not your personal ability to repay it. These loans, or DSCR loans, will look at the income that the property is making and determine how much you are allowed to borrow to buy that property. Now, because the income is typically higher on a short-term rental versus a long-term rental, if you're using the debt service program, you can usually get qualified to buy a higher amount to buy a short-term rental. Higher amounts mean you can buy better properties in better areas and in better condition. In general, this will help your real estate investing. Now, the downside of these loans is they typically come with a slightly higher interest rate. Would you like to know how I know all this? Well, I own a mortgage company. I got tired of dealing with incompetent loan officers, so I started my own business. And in this company, I was having a hard time myself getting loans conventionally. I had too much real estate and too many different businesses that it was becoming a huge headache to get qualified for conventional loans. So I told my partner, Christian, we need to find a loan that is easier for people to use, that are investors that want to accumulate a lot of properties. Well, with these debt service loans, we kind of got the best of both worlds. For one, you can use them for residential real estate, not commercial real estate only, which is cool. For two, you get the 30-year fixed rate. You don't have that adjustable rate mortgage that scares a lot of people and frankly can put a lot of investors in danger 3 to 5 years in if rates have gone up really high. And I use these loans for my own properties that I am buying. Christian and I bought one together in the Smoky Mountains as a vacation rental. I use the same loans on a house that I just bought in Scottsdale with my partner, Rob Abasolo, to get a $3.5 million mansion in Scottsdale, Arizona. But I would highly recommend you reach out to one of the loan officers on my team to find out which of these loans works better for you and what we can do to help you get a loan. You can check out our website at theonebrokerage.com, or you can email us directly at intake@theonebrokerage.com. Well, I promised that I would tell you what type of properties I'm buying. So here it is. The ideal investment to me has multiple exit strategies and minimal variables of things that I have to worry about that could go wrong. I also like to avoid only having one exit strategy. I'm going to buy this house and rent it out as a short-term rental, because what if something goes wrong and I can't rent it out as a short-term rental? I like to have multiple ways I can make this work. It works as a short-term rental. It works as a long-term rental. It works as something in the middle, which we call corporate housing. I could add value and then I could sell it if I wanted to. I have 4 different ways that I can use this property, which decreases my risk. So I look for properties where I can shoot for the best, but if it doesn't work out, I'm still safe because I have multiple tiers of strategies that will work. What does that look like? Well, first off, I start with the best location because I want to be, like I said, shooting for the top result that I can possibly get. The next thing I look for is a big house. I like a lot of square footage because that gives me options. So what I'm looking for is flexibility in properties. I always want to plan for the worst, but shoot for the best. Now, if you take that same approach, if you take all the information we talked about in this video and you look at every property through that perspective, the odds of you losing money in real estate become very, very small. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed what I'm sharing. I hope I got those wheels turning as you're trying to figure out what your next investment could be. And I hope you understand how I can help you reduce risk as well as maximize the upside, because that's what business is all about. Hey, so if you like what you see, please like this video as well as comment below. I want to hear specifically what you liked or what you wish I would have talked about more. And then what's most important is you actually subscribe to the channel so that you get notified when a new video like this comes out. Also, sneak peek. Keep watching this channel to see more content specifically around the luxury mansion that I bought in Scottsdale, Arizona with my partner, Rob, so you can get a behind the scenes look of what that property looks like and decide if you might want to put your own vacation together to go visit it.